Hello, it's Zeke Freak. Today, I wanted to talk about the little shonen that could, World Trigger. I have a long and, to me at least, interesting history with this series because it kind of came out of the blue for me when the anime dropped in 2014. You know, at a time when I was watching basically everything that was coming out. For some reason, this one always stood out to me, and I kept with it throughout the first season's original run of 73 episodes, which even back then, and especially today, would be unusual on long runners like that. Ongoings, series are a bit unusual, so I kept up with it though, despite all of the problems people had with it. Even today, the reputation, which I still think is a little overblown, the reputation of one of Toei's lesser productions with its stilted directing and animation, and it wasn't a looker. I still think that's a bit overblown, but I can't deny that the first season was padded out and clearly didn't have as many resources put into it as it should have. But on the other hand, there were many aspects that stood out a lot. For example, I actually think it has pretty good visual direction for the most part. Despite the directing I actually think is really good. It's the editing I think where things kind of fell apart a little bit. But even so, I didn't mind following it week to week. Skip the recaps. They're always right at the beginning. So I thought the directing was actually pretty good, especially for its time slot where things tend to be a little bit sanitized and stock. And also the voice acting was really good, and the soundtrack especially. The one thing about World Trigger that always sticks with me is its fucking soundtrack, which you're listening to like the main theme right now, with that incredible motif hook that it has that refuses to leave your brain. This is sounding pretty disjointed, but really the reason the show always stuck with me is because I didn't know anyone else that was watching it. I didn't know anyone else that was talking about it. And it's a show that does a lot of interest. This is not a review of the series, by the way. Just to let that. Man, I am rambling today. Not a review of the series or anything. Maybe I was going to do a big review a while ago, before even the second season was even announced. But because my laptop being weak, I just decided I didn't want to do videos like that anymore. Maybe one day, who knows. But what always struck with me is that nobody else was talking about it. Nobody else I knew was watching it. And it was weird. World Trigger is kind of strange. Because in some ways it's very typical shonen, but in other ways it's very subversive, and there's a lot of unique qualities to it. It's very down to earth. It has a lot of... It's realistic without necessarily being dark, which is interesting because a lot of times when shonen tends to interject realism, it ends up going in a much darker direction. As much as I love it, something like Hunter x Hunter shows that a lot. But here it manages to have a sense of realism and weight without necessarily being all that darker than normal shonen, which is interesting. And there's just something about the way the characters are written where it's very down tempo and very... It's like everybody's got stuff going on, but they don't feel the need to tell you about it, because it's like... They feel real in the sense that they don't always feel like characters, if that makes sense. And that's something you both do and don't want out of a story, I guess. This is really hard to describe. It's just interesting. And I'm not even sure fans of the series will necessarily agree with my take here, but I just think it's interesting. Like everyone is not everyone, but like the dialogue is written with this very dry wit that it just has a lot of interesting qualities is what I'm getting at. It's unique. And for the longest time, I couldn't decide if I really liked it or if I only liked it ironically because I was in the secret club of people who knew about it. But over time, I started, especially since I rewatched the show in preparation for its return, which I'll get to in its second season last year. And I found that it actually does a lot of things very right. Despite it, I was kind of off-put a bit by the weirdness at first when I was watching it week to week. But binging it, I noticed that it does a lot of things really well. There's a lot of competence to it. I still have some issues with it. I don't think it's peak shonen or anything, but like I really do enjoy not only its unique vibe, but also just how well it manages to characterize such a large cast. Its focus on actual strategy and tactics. It's very much the anti-shonen in that regard. This is like the most tactical and restrained shonen series I think you'll ever find. It doesn't rely on, like, everything has like an apply, like huge swaths of the story are dedicated to just explaining the mechanics, almost like a video game, and like they stick to them, like they're actual like very hard set rules, which is another thing that threw me off back then, but over the years I've come to really appreciate it. And it's not even like mystic rules like something like Hunter x Hunter, but it's like very hard, like almost science-y rules. And I don't know, just over time, I think part of it is definitely that like it was kind of like my secret thing for a long time. And like that sounds like a very weird thing to say about a series that is whose manga has 15 million copies in circulation, but like I don't know, just like in my circles, the people I was following and whatnot, the communities I was in, like nobody seemed all that interested in it, and it was just like a thing that I had to myself, me and my dumb observations and in-jokes, and it became very personal to me, which is why I was actually really stoked when the anime came back. Especially considering that the mangaka Daisuke Ashihara went on a 2-year hiatus for his health between 2016 and 2018. And this is where it becomes even more personal to me, is that I respect the fuck out of Ashihara, because not only did he come back, but he came back and he was, because I mean, like, let's set the scene a little bit, because at the time World Trigger started in 2013. Ashihara, young and up-and-coming mangaka, when was fresh in his career, and just a few years into his tenure, in the largest shonen magazine, realizes that he has a chronic spinal condition that makes obviously working on this series very difficult. And when he left, I think I and a lot of other people said, okay, well, that's it, it's done. It's not canceled, but it's canceled. But it wasn't. And 2 years later, when he figured out his system and he sorted everything out, he came back. They transferred him from Weekly Shonen Jump to the monthly publication Jump Square. And he has kind of a unique setup where, because he apparently planned the story out long term and he already had like the weekly chapters in mind pacing wise, Jump Square basically lets him keep doing that, but basically, ideally, he'll publish 2 of what would have been weekly chapters in Weekly Shonen Jump in Jump Square as a monthly issue. And this actually allows him a degree of flexibility I don't think I've seen it any other mangaka get, because some months, depending on his fluctuating health, sometimes he'll do 2 chapters a month, sometimes he'll do 1 chapter a month, sometimes he'll skip a month entirely. And this means that the progression is pretty slow, but he does keep chugging along. He does what he can to continue the story. And, you know, I think part of why I find that so admirable is because of my experience being a Hunter x Hunter fan, and I know this is old hat for anyone in that fandom, but like Yoshihiro Togashi, he's been on hiatus for I think 4 years now, at least. This is the longest hiatus yet, and he's been on very long hiatuses before, you know, hiatus, ex-hiatus, the whole joke. But I think, and like if Togashi's health situation is really so bad he cannot work on the series, that's fine. I understand that. I don't want to force him to do something he's not physically capable of doing. But what I don't like, what I've grown, there's been an animosity growing within me towards Togashi because he doesn't fucking communicate anything. And I'm not saying I need like details into every facet of his personal life. I don't. I'm sure most of it is unpleasant. But just you know, I think what frustrates me about the Hunter x Hunter situation is that it's been left in this perpetual limbo where nobody knows what the fuck is going on, because the guy behind it just refuses to tell anyone anything. You know, I'm not saying he needs to make a Twitter and give us weekly updates on his health, but like, just, you know, what are his plans? Does he even intend to continue? You know, what's a realistic estimation for that? Or should he just drop it altogether? You know, I just want him, you know, at a certain point, I just want the man to make a decision. You know, and that's part of why I respect Ashihara so much, because he came back and he proclaimed, he made a decision that he was going to keep going as best as he can. And I respect the fuck out of that, because I know it's probably not easy for him. You know, but I think what I appreciate most in that situation is just that he gave us an answer. Whereas, you know, for how long the hiatuses have sprung up, Togashi has for decades not given us an answer, and that frustrates the hell out of me. It really does. And not only that, but Ashihara not only continues the series, but he also he made compromises to ensure that he could. You know, it was not his plan to be a monthly mangaka, but that's just how things turned out. You know, I'm sure he's somewhat frustrated that he's not as far along in the story as he probably would have liked to have been. There's a lot of things about World Trigger that make it pretty obvious to me that it was always planned to be a weekly serialization, and I think when you have something that's as slow paced as World Trigger, adding on the monthly schedule makes it even slower, you know. And that might not be something Ashihara is super, you know, happy with, but like, it's a vision that he's sticking to. And, you know, one day when you binge the whole thing, it's not gonna fucking matter what the release schedule was, you know. So I guess I just really have a personal respect for Ashihara and his work, because he's done what I think so many other mangaka haven't done, which is not only come back and work through a difficult disability, but also keep people communicated. That's a bad way to word that sentence. Communicate with his audience. You know, and it's not like he does it all. It's not like he has to like let us in on every little detail. He doesn't. But like, when he's going through stuff, there's a blurb that's like, hey, Ashihara's going through stuff, so there's only 1 chapter this month, or there's no chapters this month, or whatever. You know, there's some communication, even if it's through an editorial department or whatever, like, there's some communication there. We know what the fuck's going on, and I just appreciate that, you know. because, and it's not just Togashi. This has been a thing. This is a thing with mangaka in general, where they're very private, and they don't let the audience in a whole lot, and that's fine in most cases. But when it comes to situations like this, where there's an ambiguity over whether or not, the work will even continue in the first place, I don't know. I just think Ashihara is just someone I really admire for that reason. He we thought his work was dead and gone. We thought his career was over, but he came back. He came back swinging, and he does the best he can with a bad situation, and he communicates with his audience. And now I'm talking in circles, but I think you get the point. And not only has the anime come back now, but part of the upswell in the drama of the tale of World Trigger for me is the fact that not only has Toei brought the anime back, but they're putting way fucking more effort into it than I think they have any right to. Like, this has to be somebody's passion project, because, like, Season 2 and what we've seen of Season 3 so far, have you seen that OP? Seriously. Like, it's one of Toei's best productions yet, from a directorial and animation standpoint. And, like, that feels kind of random, like, right? Like, they brought back this show that they hadn't worked on for 6 years, with a manga that updates very slowly. And nobody would have blamed them if they never brought it back. But I don't know. I get the sense that, like, World Trigger is kind of like a passion project for Toei. I think the thing that always sticks in my mind is that they have the little omake sequences at the end of the episodes with the little chibi cutout versions of the characters, and the one at the end of episode 73, the end of the first run, if you will, there was like a real like emotionalness to the fact that the show was going away, and the characters were literally like, maybe we'll see each other again one day, it depends on your support. Very frank. Like, that's a frank thing, to discuss that with your viewers. Like, think about the target audience for like what they were doing at the time. That was like when did that air? Like 11 a.m. on Sundays or something. It's like, I don't know. There's like a earnestness to that. Like that really stuck with, even though like I wasn't like I was only like a casual fan at the time when I first saw episode 73 when it aired. When I saw that omake sequence at the end, I'm like, for some reason that kind of hit me. It's like, man, the staff must have really liked working on this, because they seemed so reluctant to let it go. Like, they even did that filler arc just to, when there still seemed to be a chance of the series continuing its weekly schedule, which obviously didn't happen. But like, like Toei kind of tried to keep the show going as long as they could until they caught right up to the manga's ass, and they were like, well, we have to stop now, because we can't just do 2+ years of filler arcs. Like, that's not something we're interested in doing. But we really wish we didn't have to stop, and now they get to keep going. And they brought all the voices back. They brought the same composer back, the same amazing composer, Kenji Kawai, I think. A lot of the same staff. Like, it's a comeback you don't see a whole lot in anime. Like, it's just one of those things that you would have, like, the history of anime is littered with incomplete adaptations. It is littered with things that only existed to promote the source material and then just up and vanished. And for 6 years I was under the impression that World Trigger was the same way. But it's back. They brought it back. Like, it's just, like, it seems almost miraculous to me that this both the manga and the anime, and Ashihara himself, the comeback kings, This is a really disjointed video, and so much of it was barely even about World Trigger itself, but I just need to gush a little. I need to gush about the weird personal attachment I have to this unusual shonen manga, and the comeback story of both its creator, the work itself, and its anime adaptation. Like, there's a fiercely dedicated following for this series somewhere, I have to imagine, because it just despite all of the hardships that get in the way of it, it just refuses to die. And I'm pretty grateful for that. And I think, hopefully, the story doesn't look anywhere near close to finishing. If anything, it almost feels like it's just getting started in the manga, which is kind of crazy to think about, because it's already been in publication for 8 years now, but like, that's just how it goes sometimes, you know. So, you know, hopefully it will continue charging, barreling forward, you know, and I'm looking forward to it. Like, this is just the weird little thing that I follow, and I'm happy to do so. Yeah, that's the video. Zeke Freak out. Ciao, ciao for now.